And now to our top stories. Russia's military operation in Ukraine continues as the Kremlin says it has not yet achieved all its war aims. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that the operation will persist until these goals are met. The main objective remains the security of people in eastern Ukraine. Following Western intervention, Moscow claims the conflict has escalated into a larger confrontation. The Kremlin also says it cannot provide a date for the next talks on Ukraine. And now joining us live, we have Ben Aris, who is a former Moscow bureau chief from the Daily Telegraph, joining us from Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us. First question, Russia has changed the goalposts for the war. They started the war talking about denazifying Ukraine, but are now talking about territorial claims and the safety of people in the Donbass region. Do you believe that the changing of these goalposts is just a way of lengthening the war?
Well, you have to separate the rhetoric from the realities, the goal. I mean, the Kremlin has made it clear, and Putin's been talking about this since 2007, that his big beef is NATO's expansion eastwards. And what they were afraid of is Ukraine joining NATO, NATO putting missiles in on the Russia-Ukraine border, and that gives missiles a 5-minute flight time to 80% of the Russian population. So it's a gun held to the head. And Putin's always talked about that. But once the war started, he also has to sell the whole campaign to the Russian people, because you have to understand that, you know, Russia is full of Ukrainians, and everybody is like, they have family, cousins, friends. The two are linked at the hip. And so attacking Ukraine is for the Russian people very uncomfortable, because these are like cousins or brothers, however you want to describe them. So we had all the denazification, and that had to do also with the change of regime following the ousting of Yanukovych, which the Kremlin claimed was pushed by a far-right element in Ukraine, and there is a far-right element in Ukraine. So I don't know, it's a lot of noise. You can ignore a lot of it, and it's not necessarily that the rhetoric is changing because they want to continue the war. It's part of like how Putin continues to sell this to his own population. And they, I have to say, have largely bought into the Kremlin's rhetoric, particularly Putin's point that Russia isn't at war with Ukraine. This is a proxy war with NATO. And most Russians believe that. And if you look at the facts that most of the weapons and money that Ukraine is using to stay in the war has been supplied by NATO. So it's not a stretch of the imagination to argue that.
You said that some Russians feel uncomfortable with attacking Ukraine as they see the Ukrainians as their cousins. The Ukraine-Russia war is now 4 years in length, which is actually longer than Russia was involved in World War II. How do you think that the Ukraine-Russia war has affected the culture and the psyche of the Russian people?
It's reinforced the sort of paranoia that Russians have. Before the war, relations and the image of the states had improved vastly as they got over the Soviet legacy of like NATO and America being the perennial enemy. And the Russian people were embracing US culture, you know, because of all the goodies that comes with it, you know, capitalism and consumerism, what have you. However, nationalism, patriotism at the moment is at an all-time high. And again, as I say, they've bought into the Kremlin's propaganda. The Kremlin is actually very good at managing its message to its own people. And there's a lot of hatred of the states, but Russians do feel like they're under attack by America. Having said that, you know, the proposal Trump has put forward, this Dmitriev package, this $12 trillion worth of business deals, if that were to go ahead, then I think Russians would actually quite happily get back into bed with Americans and do business with them. Because at the end of the day, the Russians have embraced capitalism, and business is business, and they're very pragmatic about it. And so they would do deals and go to work with Americans. So it could change again. It's not sort of fixated, but it's also created a very strong Russian identity. And as I say, fueled by a certain amount of paranoia that everybody's out to get them, and that they've been excluded from Europe, which they have. And this all plays to Putin's advantage. He's been capitalizing on these stereotypes.
So you mentioned the Trump package. How do you believe, what do you believe the success rate will be of this actually passing in the United States, as there is strong opposition against any support for Russia by the Democrats and some members of the Republican Party there?
Yeah, at the moment, look, business is business, and Trump has shown that he will ride roughshod over all the laws and the checks and balances. He's increasingly doing things by executive order, which is effectively a presidential decree that doesn't need approval by Congress. We just saw this with tariffs. That got shut down by the Supreme Court. And I think now he's put it in place, and his basic point about America not having access to critical minerals is a key one that everybody understands is true. And Russia is a cornucopia of critical minerals in particular, not just oil and gas, diamonds, gold, agriculture. It's a huge consumer market. There's a lot of business to be done by American companies. And I think if he actually delivers on this business package, and the amount of money they're talking about, 12 trillion, that's 6 times the size of the entire Russian economy. So this is a huge amount of money. And I think if you put that amount of money on the table, that despite the reservations that some Republicans have and Democrats, that I think they will take the money, they'll do the deal.
All right, Ben, please don't go far and stay with us as we move to our next story.